Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. So in the last video, what we did is we created a new project, or we basically used the default SQLite 3 database, okay, that exists inside of when you generate a new Rails project. And we created a quick cats model, and we saw that how you could use the generate resource command for the generator migration for you to generate the routes for you, but you would have to then write out all your own controller functions in your controller. Now what I'm going to do in this video okay so what we're going to do is we're going to delete this project because I don't need this project anymore. Boop. So now I'm going to show you how to set it up with Postgres, because I want to set up the Postgres database so you guys know how to use a Postgres database. And then we're going to use another command called Scaffold, which actually goes the extra step in setting up your controller functions for you. Okay, making it really easy to set up an API. Okay, so then here we go. So let's first generate a new project. So I'm going to CD back up into, well, actually I'm just going to close this altogether. And then I'm going to make a new terminal, so that way it automatically opens in my Intro to Rails folder, the folder that I have opened up in VS Code. And we're going to do Rails new. We'll call this my API again. Again, I want it to just be an API. I want to skip yarn. And I want to, if I remember right, it's -d Postgres, but I'll check again. Postgres SQL. So that's going to say the database is Postgres SQL. But let me just double check. Okay, Ruby Rails Postgres flag. Okay, boop 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 boop. Gem so Rails, Postgres, create role. We got all that. Rails. Here we go. Database Postgres SQL. Let's actually use that. Okay, so dash database equals Postgres SQL. Dash. So let me go back over here. Delete that. Dash database equals PostgreSQL. Okay, and if we do that, that's going to create a new project, except it's going to have Postgres set up as a default database. It's going to skip yarn and give us our API setup. Okay, again, that's the beauty of Rails. If you use the CLI right, it does a lot of the work for you, making life a lot easier. Okie dokie. Now let's see here. Let's explore. So let's see the differences. See, I don't see a yarn lock because it used npm instead. Instead, I see a, well, I don't really see any either because I don't think it really needs it for an API setup. Okay. But again, this is a fresh install, so it doesn't have anything. But let's go check out the database logs. Nope, I mean config database.yaml. Okay. Now notice the database.yaml looks different because see, it's set up for Postgres. Okay, you need to make sure that you have the Postgres gem installed. So it's been added to the gem file. So see, the gem file now has PG. It didn't have that before. That's another reason why it's nice to set up your project this way, because it makes sure that the right gems are activated inside the gem file. So in that case, you're still going to want to do a bundle. Well, you want to CD into the folder first. So CD my API, and then do like a bundle install. So that way it goes into that gem file, make sure that it has everything installed. Okay, just kind of goes through all this, make sure that anything you need in here is installed. Okay. Okay, and then again, you want to do that because sometimes you run into like little troubleshooting issues you have to with some of the gems. So you rather find that out, figure out what the troubleshooting you need to do and get it figured out. Cool. So then the next thing we want to do is set it up for our local database. Okay. Now, here's the thing. You have to make sure that the database and all that stuff is created ahead of time locally. Now, for production, when we upload to Heroku, we're just going to have a database URL that's automatically passed in. So I'm going to actually take this piece right here, copy that, and paste it right over this. Okay, because when you go to Heroku will automatically create a Heroku a database for you, and it'll pass it in as this environmental variable. And the syntax is how you use environmental variables in Heroku. It's the only one that really or environmental variables in Ruby. But this is the only one that should really matter if you're deploying to Heroku. As long as you have that there, like that, that's good. Okay, and then when you push it up to Heroku, this will automatically be filled in with your Heroku database information. So all we really care about now is the information for our local database. Okay, and the problem is we need a username and password and all that stuff. Okay, so it should tell you somewhere in the comments what are those here: port, host, password, username. So we need to add those because it needs to match our local database. I'm going to add those to my default. So port, I mean, I don't need to really change the port because those by default it's going to look local, but I'll do it anyways. So host should be localhost. Port, by default, SQL runs on 5432. And if you're ever not sure, like if that doesn't work, the way you check is you can go to PSQL, type in PSQL to go to your Postgres console. And then here you can type in /con_info. And see, that tells me what port my Postgres is running on. So I can see that my Postgres is running on 5432. Okay, and then if I want to see all users, I think I just type in like, let's see here. Show Postgres. Show all users. Okay. I'm gonna assume that's it. Display users, DU, that makes sense. So then I do type in /DU. And those are all the users I've created. Okay, so if you wanted to create a new user, I already have plenty of them. See, they're all super users already, so there's no real need to make another one. But the way you would do it is you would do create user, then you would put the username, so I would say test6, okay, with super user, okay, and password, and I would just do the same thing, test6. Okay, and this is just a local super user for you using your local Postgres. And since it's super user, it works with all your Postgres databases locally. So that's the reason I would do that. Okay, so that's how you would do that if you don't know what your user is and you can't think of one. That way it's done. Okay, I'm just gonna quit out of this. So /Q for Postgres. Okay. But then for username, I have test5, so I'm going to use test5, username, test5, and then the password should also be test5. Okay, cool. So since this is under default, it should automatically put those settings under development and practice and test. Cool. So now it's automatically going to create a database with my application's name. I need to tell it to do that. So now that I have the settings set up, okay, I've added these things to default. Localhost, that's always going to be the same, as long as you have Postgres running locally. And then username and password for your super user. Now I should be able to type in Rails db create, just like we did with SQLite 3. Rails db create. Okay, and then watch what happens. So it says we're running version bundler. There we go. So you create a database, my API development. Cool. So it created those databases. So if I go back to my Postgres, okay, now I should be able to connect to that database. So my API, actually, even before I do that, let's just see if I can find the list of databases. I think it's just /d. No, that's displays the tables. Is it DD? No. Is it DB? No. I can always just do /h for /help. Nope, those are SQL commands. So let's type in /help. Nope, that's still help. Here we go, /h for L, /? For the PSQL commands. So where's the one to display all databases? Query buffer, help, conditional, informational, here we go. Display list table views, sequences, list table spaces, list default privileges, list data types, list, here we go, list databases, /l. So let's try that out. Q/l. There we go. So we can see my API databases were created, okay? And who were they created by? User test 5. So by giving Rails the right information, the database YAML, it just knows to do the thing. Okay, so let me get out of there, Q. Get out of Postgres, Q. And now, since I'm connected to Postgres, if I do Rails DB console, it's going to actually connect me to the Postgres console with my user to that database. And see, and then it's going to ask me for the password, test5. And see, now I'm connected to my API, so I can now start entering commands in there. So that's cool. Okay, so we're connected to Postgres. Yay! Okay. Now we want to generate that cat model. Except now, instead of using the resource command, we're going to use what's called the scaffold command, which does what resource does, but just one step further. So I'm going to say Rails generate, so G for generate, scaffold, cat. Actually, I should do it capital cat. Scaffold cat, name. Name again is going to be a string, and then age is going to be an integer. And then that's that. Oh, what did I do wrong there? Oh, forgot the S in Rails. Rails. So see, it generated all the same things. So if I go back to my database, now there's a migration file. See, creating the name and integer. Good. So we can migrate that file. So we can do Rails DB migrate. Oh, something went wrong. So let's find out what was really error. Generally, it's going to be at the top. So let's see here. Oh, that's a long one. Error has occurred. This is an all later migrations canceled. Method int. I think this is supposed to be integer. I should have spelled integer. So I think that's where I went wrong there. So I can just fix that directly in the migration. So t integer. And let me try that again. Yep, there we go. That fixed it. It's integer, not int. It's just so many different languages in my head. They all get mixed up. Okay. So let's see here. String, integer. Good. And then see here we see a confirmation that we create the table. But if I want to be 100% sure that the table got created, I can go into my Rails DB console. So that takes me to my Postgres console. Test5. And I can just do like a /DT to display tables. Okay, and there it is. Cats. The cats table got created. Okay. You also notice this table here, schema migrations. That's how Rails is able to keep track whether it ran a migration before. So this table here actually has every time you migrate, it creates a record in that database saying this migration has run before. So that way, next time you run migrations, it doesn't run that one again. So now if I were to create a fresh database where that table doesn't exist, it would then run all the migrations that I've created up to that point because it doesn't have that table. So that's how migrations are working under the hood. It's actually creating a separate table to track which migrations have been run already. So /q. So we created our table. So the table exists in the database now. Okay, and now let's go back to the other things that it creates. It created our model. So we'll see here, like here's our cat model. Yay. And then we see our cat controller. Here's our cat controller. But now look at the difference. Now our cat controller has all the functions already built inside of it. Create, update. So when you use Scaffold, not only does it create the controller for you, but it gives you all the functions. Okay, and this is a nice thing to see because then you can kind of see how you would and you can customize them. So if you want to do something different, you can then just customize your CRUD routes from here. So this definitely makes life a lot easier. And it creates these two methods. This one is just like in case for like update and delete. This is grabbing the particular, see, it's grabbing the ID param and then pulling that particular cat from the database. And then this cat param is just pulling the params in general. So it pulls the params from the URL. Okie dokie. or actually it's pulling the JSON data. So this allows you to pull the name and age from the JSON data, which is nice. Okay. So this is a good thing to kind of read over, see how these routes were created. But they're pretty straightforward. So you see here index is just saying that the cats property equals all the cats. So it grabs all the cats from the database and then sends them back as JSON. This one is just taking the cat property that's set up by this method over here, set cat, and then sending it back as JSON because you're specifying a single cat to be sent back. Create creates a new cat using the cat params. And again, the cat params get generated down here. So this cat params method returns an object with the JSON data. Okay. And then what we do is it saves that cat to the database and then returns it as JSON. Same thing here. This takes the selected cat. Okay, because again, that one's gonna, because we go way up to the top here, we see this before action. Before action means these are things that happen before the function gets run. So before the function, any of these functions get run, it's going to run the set cat method, which is the method down here, set cat. But it only does it for show, update, and destroy, because those are the only three that really care about grabbing a particular cat. So that's how that reads. It's saying, hey, use this set cat function before you run the function, but only do that for the show, update, and destroy functions. Okay? So you can specify a lot of cool behavior using that before action, which these are referred to as macros. Okay, so these little helper functions inside Ruby on Rails classes are always referred to as macros. So if you were to Google, like the Rails before action macro, they're just functions, but they call them macros. Okay, but this is a good thing to kind of study and see how it's constructed. And then if I go to routes, so again, that's going to be in database. No, it's going to be in config database, not database YAML, routes.rb. We see here again resource cats, and that's how it knows about the 6 routes as we learned before. Okay, but now it's using our Postgres database. We have our 6 CRUD routes. They should be working. So if I were to do Rails server, okay, so literally in 17 minutes, with a lot of explanation, we've got an API up and running without doing really like anything. That's the beauty of Rails. Okay, so let's open up Postman. And let's test this out. Let's make some cats. Okay, localhost 3000. Okay, and the thing is I don't know exactly what route it should be. I always forget if it's cat or cats. Let's take a look at routes. I'm assuming it's going to be cats, but let's try it out. So cats. So if that's the case, I should get an empty array when I do get. Yep, I got an empty array, so that's correct. So let's create a new cat. Again, that's going to be a body. It's going to be raw, JSON, and name and age. That works. So we hit send, and there's our new cat. Yay. Okay, I'll copy the ID. Put that at the end of the URL so I can do an update. So put, and we'll call it Stacy the second. And see, now it's Stacy the second. And then I'll delete Stacy. And Stacy's deleted. So now if I go back to cats and I do a get, I should get an empty array again. And there you go. You got full CRUD on cats. Okay, not so bad, right? So that's the very basics of Rails. There's also cool things you can do with relationships. Just read the Rails documentation, but that gives you sort of a phrase, sort of how Rails works, where all the main files are. There's a lot of other useful files to be aware of. So let's take a quick look. So if I go into config, there's stuff you can specify about the particular environments, but I don't think there's any real reason to touch that. Initializers, like here's the cores file, like if you wanted to set up cores permissions and whatnot. You know, again, there's a lot of comments that give you directions on how each of these files work. MIME types, none of that stuff really needs to be changed. Locals. Yeah, most of this stuff doesn't really need to be touched. Database environment. Boom. Yeah, most of the stuff you can just leave it alone. There's a seed file, so if you wanted to like do like add a couple like random cats, you could use this seed file to add some cats. So what I would do is I would just right under this I would do something like cat, because cat should be the model, cat.new. So I'll say cat1 equals cat.new Stacy, who's 5, and then cat1.save to save the cat, and then that would be it. Control C. And to run this file, what I would do is I would just do like Rails db seed, and that runs this particular file. Okay, I made a mistake somewhere, so let's take a look. 0 to 1. Oh, I think I know why. I think I'm supposed to be passing in this. Name Stacy. Age 5. Like that, so that way it's treated as like one hash being passed in. Yep, there we go. Let me run the server again, see if Stacy got added. Rails server. Oh, is the server running? Oop, I've typed Rails server. Rails server. Yep, and see Stacy got added. Okay. So seed is a cool way if you want to seed the database. You can just kind of put all your code to seed there and then comment it out and uncomment it out whenever you need to. So that's a cool thing you can do. Most of this other stuff I don't think you ever really need to touch. Storage, test, yeah. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. That's kind of what you need to do in Rails. Rails, like I know for me, just keep in mind, like this is, I don't think this happens to most people, it just happens to me for some reason. Like in this file right here, bin bundle, this was referred to as a shebang, and it always breaks it for me because it's supposed to be just user Ruby and Ruby, no version number after it. That breaks it. So that always messes me up when I'm trying to deploy to Heroku. So keep that in mind. You might want to just check that. But otherwise, the way you would deploy this is you would just push this up to Heroku. And then once it's pushed up to Heroku, you would just, do a migration and you should be all deployed. Okay, because the only environmental variable is the Postgres URL. Heroku, the minute you upload this, you connect this, it'll notice that it uses Postgres and make the Postgres database for you and set up the environmental variable. So long as inside your database.yaml, your production looks like this, it'll automatically pick up on that Heroku URL. So the only time we really need this default stuff is really for like development and test environments for when you're on your computer. Yeah, but that's a good introduction to Rails. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. My name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.